Hi everyone, Zach here, and in this video I will show you 14 awesome modeling hacks for Blender which can be really useful. So before we get started, I want to thank my friend Lukas Walzer for providing some of his cool modeling tricks for this video. So the tips you see in this video are a mixture of my and Lukas tips. And Lukas is, by the way, an awesome artist. Check out his portfolio, link in the video description. Also a huge thank you to AD Brewers and Gleb Alexandrov for supporting this video. They just released a brand new hard surface modeling course for Blender. 100% Blender, no external paid add-ons used there. And I checked this course out and I'm really impressed how comprehensive this is. It contains over 80 videos with a total running time of over 13 hours. And it is split into two parts. The first part is aimed for more beginners or for all the people which just want to learn all the tips and tricks and techniques, everything you need to know about hard surface modeling. And in the second big part, they will show you how to create this awesome looking robot. So if you ever dreamed of creating your own robots, spaceships or other hard surface objects, this is a must-have course. So kudos to AD and Gleb for putting this awesome course together. If you want to learn more, check the link in the video description. Alright guys, without further words, let's get started.
Hack number 1, quick hard surface modeling setup. So here's my favorite hard surface setup because it's so easy to handle and your base geometry is super simple. So just for your understanding, we will use the subsurf modifier in general. So let's add the subsurf modifier to this corner thing and let's subdivide this even higher. And as you can see, the mesh will be subdivided and we will have this rounded shape. But for creating hard surface objects, sometimes you want smooth and rounded shapes and sometimes you want more or less hard edges. So for achieving hard edges, you would probably go to edit mode and just add some loop cuts here, and you can see the closer 3 of those edges here are together, the sharper the edge will be. But if you add a lot of loop cuts, this can make modeling and handling your mesh much harder. So there's another method which makes this much easier and faster to handle. Let's take this cube here, and for that we need the bevel modifier. So let's add the bevel modifier, and as you can see, this one is beveling the edges, so we basically have 2 loop cuts close to each other. So if I now add the subsurf modifier and decrease the width here, you can see that we have a sharper edge here. And if we add more segments, which basically adds another loop cut here in the center, it gets even sharper, as you can see. So we have this very nice geometry with only these 2 modifiers. But right now, if I, for example, add a loop cut here and edit this, every edge on the object has the beveling, which is not that nice because sometimes I want to create a smooth and rounded shape over here. And for this, let's limit the method to weight. That means we have to define manually which edge should be beveled and which not. So if weight is enabled, we can switch to edit mode, then press N, and up here we have the edges data. Don't confuse this with the vertex data because the name of the option is the same over here. And now I can select edges and increase the bevel weight. So the bevel weight basically defines the percentage we want to use from the maximum widths we have set up over here. So if I set this to 0.1 for example, and up here I set this to 0.5, then we only use 50% of this value, meaning 0.05 for example. So we can define the bevel widths for each edge here individually. Let's add this up here with 1, decrease this value here a bit. Let's enable the subsurf modifier, and then you can see this is getting interesting. If I, for example, now add here the mean bevel weight, and for example over here, and maybe here as well, then we have an interesting looking hard surface object. Let's subdivide this even more and set the shading to smooth. And then look at this. This looks awesome, but the original mesh is just this simple object here. And we don't have any loop cuts flying around here and disturbing the editing, because right now it's super easy to simply edit the shapes from the object. So, and we can drive this even further. Let's go to the third example here. It's a simple cylinder and it doesn't have thickness, but I don't want to add thickness in edit mode. We can simply add the solidify modifier to add thickness over here. Then we use the bevel modifier with limit method to weight. Then let's select this up here, set the mean bevel weight to 1 and this down here. Then let's decrease the channel width here and let's add this subsurf modifier. Maybe add one more segments. And now we have this very nice looking hard surface object. And now, for example, if I add some loop cuts over here, I can change the shape and the thickness is always adjusting automatically. And certainly we can also add holes here and then add the mean bevel weight. And as you can see, this is really fun to work with. So, and just to give you a practical example, here is a rocket I built for a client. It looks pretty decent in terms of the resolution, but if we are going over to scene and enable simplify and set the viewport to 0, then all the subsurf modifiers will be disabled. And now you can see the original shape here. All this stuff down here are just squares and rectangles, as you can see. Also up here, if we take a look at the hands, super simple objects actually. And if we enable all the subsurf modifiers, you can see these are pretty interesting shapes just created with the setup I just showed you. Hack number 2, limit modifiers through vertex groups. So a vertex group is basically a group of vertices, as you might have expected. So if you go to object data, vertex groups, select a bunch of vertices, click on the plus button and then hit assign. So all the vertices will be assigned in this group. You can also remove them if you like, and you can also select them or deselect them. So we now have this vertex group of this ring up here. Now let's, for example, add solidify modifier, add the thickness over here. And now we can choose this vertex group up here. That means we are limiting the effect of the modifier only to this vertices. You can also invert this by clicking on this button. And this is a pretty powerful tool actually. If we go back to this rocket here, let's take a look at the wiper over here. And as you can see, this is a simple but decent looking object. But if we disable all the modifiers over here, you can see these are actually just a few planes placed above each other. And here we are using a vertex group to control the thickness of the solidify modifier. So let's enable all the modifiers up here and let's remove the vertex group just for a second. So this is what it would look original if I would just use the solidifier as it is. But now I want to control the thickness of all the individual parts over here. Let's switch to edit mode, select everything, and first of all, pack all the vertices into one vertex group. Create a new group, hit assign, then let's go to the solidify modifier, and here we have to add the group. And now, in order to change the thickness, we have to change the weight of certain vertices. So we can define how much the vertex group should affect the modifier. So for example, if I hit L above this object, I only have this one square. And now down here we see the weight value. So let's set this to 0.5 and hit assign. Now these vertices are only affecting the modifier 50% basically. And in this way, you can easily change, for example, the thickness of things. And the cool thing is you not only can affect this in general, you can also create this transition basically. So if I, for example, select this 4 vertices here and then set this down to a lower value, you can see we have this transition from thicker to thinner. Hack number 3. Skin modifier modeling. So there's one modifier I love because it's so simple and you can do some pretty cool things with this. I'm talking about the skin modifier. So let's add the skin modifier to this cube here. And as you can see what it does, it basically generates this geometry around the edges. So if I go to edit mode and disable this button down here, I can see all the edges. I can move stuff around and you can see how this is changing. Also, if I select edges here, I can press Ctrl A to scale this. So I can make it thicker or thinner, also with single vertices here, as you can see. And if I add a subdivision modifier afterwards, we have this rather complex shape. So, and for example, I just can duplicate one edge here, Shift D. Then you can see it can happen that the skin modifier doesn't have effect on this. You have to select one vertex of the object and add this mark root, this root vertex point. And then you have a single edge with geometry. And then you can just place it over here, change the shape, scale it with Alt S. You can also, for example, if you want to have a sharper ending here, you can extrude this and put two vertices pretty close to each other. And for hard surface modeling, I feel this is really, really useful to quickly create interesting looking shapes. So if we take a look at my robot car from my artwork, The Journey, you can see that I used this technique in some cases, like for example over here. If I take a look in edit mode, you can see that I used the skin modifier over here plus an array modifier. So actually I just modeled this one edge here and then added the skin modifier and array modifier. Same thing with the cylinders over here. And even for this larger thing over here, I used simply the skin modifier technique. Also over here, this thing was modeled with the skin modifier. As you can see, just a few edges. And for example, also over here for this thing. Hack number 4, multi-resolution modifier instead of subdivision surface modifier. Usually, if you create such an object over here, you model this in relatively low poly and then add a subdivision surface modifier. And this is looking fine, but for example, if you want to add damage to this element, if you now go to edit mode, maybe enable proportional editing, you can add damage, but you are limited to the vertices you have. So for example, if I want to add this dent here, it will be pretty big and doesn't look really interesting. So what we can do instead here is to use a multi-resolution modifier. So let's add a multi-res modifier and subdivide this a few times. And the cool thing right now is that we are able to sculpt on the subdivisions from this modifier. This is not possible with the subdivision surface modifier. So if I now switch to sculpt mode, maybe use the standard sculpt draw brush here, disable symmetry, and then we can, for example, if I hold down Control, quickly add some damage over here. And this is stored inside the multi-res modifier, and if you want to have more details, just subdivide this even higher, and then you can add more interesting damage over here. But this is also useful if you, for example, quickly want to add some folds to the clothing of your character. Here, for example, as you can see, I also used the multi-res modifier to quickly sculpt some nice folds into the clothing, without modeling this in high details, which would take forever. Hack number 5, save deformation in shape keys. Okay, let's take a look at the creature once again. Let's say I have the vest here and I want to add some deformations. For example, the armature deformation has caused some troubles on the clothing and some of the deformations I don't like. So I can add shape keys to deform this without affecting the original mesh. So certainly I could get into edit mode and change stuff around, but then I would affect the original mesh. So but what I can do, I go to Object Data, add a basic shape key. Here is the standard shape of this object stored. And then I can add new shape keys. And then I can go to edit mode, for example. Let's enable proportional editing, select a few vertices here and change the shape. So I'm now changing the shape of the object without affecting the original mesh or the original shape. So if I now hit back to object mode, you can see this is disabled by default. So we have to select the key and set the value to 1. And now you can see this is changing. I have the change in my mesh, but I can always go back to the original mesh by disabling this shape key or by removing this completely. This only works for deformation, not for adding new geometry. So pretty nice. Also, if you just want to test some deformation, for example, what if the ear is shaped a bit different? Let's add a new shape key here, select it and change it a bit, maybe like this here. And then let's enable this. Then you can check, okay, does it look good? No, it looks like crap. So let's remove this shape key. Hack number 6, link meshes for better editing. So let's take a look at this cowboy creature again. Let's go to the layer with the gun here. And now I want to edit this, but right now this has this rotated position, but I don't want to change this position. But I only want to edit this part here, and it's always easier if this part is in the center for mirroring features. And also if I just want to view it straight, this is pretty hard to do if this has this rotated position over here. So what we can do, if I only want to edit one part here, I can press Alt D to duplicate this. But with Alt D, this will be automatically linked to each other. That means if I edit this mesh, this one up here will be edited automatically as well. So now I can press Alt R, Alt G, Alt S maybe, if I have scaled this a bit. And now you can see this is perfectly lying here in the center. And now I can easily edit certain parts. Let's do a few changes over here. Whatever, just to do some weird changes. And now let's take a look up here. You can see all the changes were also done on this mesh over here. So you don't have to move this part here, then edit everything and then move it back over there. Because right now I can simply delete this part here and then I have the changes on this thing here saved. Hack number 7, keyframe original position. So let's take a look at the gun again. It's basically a similar situation than in the tip before, but right now I don't just want to edit one part, I want to edit the whole gun here, but I want to somehow save this position up here. So I parented all the parts of the gun to this one main part here. As you can see, all the other parts are simply children objects. So what I can do is select this object here, go to frame 1 for example, press I and save location, rotation and scaling. Now I have saved this position I want to have. Then I go to frame number 2 and now I press Alt R, Alt G, Alt S, press I and click on Lock Road Scale again. Now you can see I've saved this new position on keyframe number 2, and if I now move to keyframe number 1 I have the original position. So now I just go to keyframe number 2 and start editing, and now I'm not limited to one object. I can also add stuff over here if I like. And when I'm done with all the editing, I can go back to keyframe number 1 and then everything is back on the position where I want to have this. And then I quickly switch to the dope sheet editor, select all the keyframes with A, press X, delete keyframes. And then I can remove this. And now all the changes are in place. Hack number 8, rotate origin. So let's take a look at this robot car again, and especially here on the robot legs. And as you can see, if I click on the objects, I have joined many of those objects together. But let's imagine I want to animate this and, for example, separate the piston here. I can quickly do this. Press L and then P selection. Now I have this as separate object, but as you can see, the origin is somewhere here in the center. Also, I have a mirror modifier on this. I should apply this as well and maybe remove one of the objects. Press P selection. And the origin is over here in the center. Certainly what I could do is to select some vertices, then hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I can go into the tool shelf, edit, set origin to 3D cursor. Then I have it in the right position, but the rotation is still wrong. What you would usually do probably is to go to edit mode, rotate everything, and then move it somewhere here to have the rotation somehow aligning properly. But we want to have this a bit more precise. So what we can do is to simply add a cube, for example. Let's scale this down a bit. Then let's go to edit mode. Let's select this part here, Shift D. I quickly duplicate this, press P, selection. So I can hide this with H. So I have only this part here. Then let's quickly add a face over here. And maybe let's disable the subsurf modifier for a while. Now I have a face, and every face has a normal. If I enable this, this is this line which is 90 degrees to the face itself. And this is the perfect alignment to the direction of this piston here. So what we can do now is to select the cube here in object mode, enable snapping, face snapping, and also align rotation with the snapping target. So what we can do now is simply press G to move this around. And as soon as it is above a surface, as you can see, it snaps to the surface. So I can move it over here, and if I make it a bit smaller, you can see it better. It now aligns perfectly with this face here. So the rotation is perfectly fine. Now what we still have to do is press Shift S again, selection to curve, so that also the position is nice. Then let's remove this part here, Alt H. So now what we can do, let's go to wireframe view. You can see here's a cube. So we can simply join this thing to the cube. So I select this and shift the cube, Control J. And now if we take a look at the local view, it has the same rotation as the cube. What I would probably do first is to duplicate this once, disable snapping here. So I have all the modifiers saved. Then I join these two things, and then I select this thing, then this thing with Shift, Control L, and link the modifiers. So I will use the same modifiers over here on this object. And then I can go to edit mode. As you can see, this cube thing here is still selected. Delete this. And basically I now have the orientation from the cube on this object. I know it's not the simple, super quick and easy way, but sometimes if you really want to have the perfect alignment of the rotation, this is a nice workflow to do it. Hack number 9, custom transform orientation. So there are some preset transform orientations which you can use. Right now we have global selected, so our manipulator is always rotated along the global axis, as you can see down here. You can also switch this, for example, to local. Then you have the local axis of the objects, or here you can see it pretty well. Now we see the local rotation of the object, and then we have a few other ones as well. But sometimes you need a custom orientation so that it is pointing in a particular direction you want to have it. So let's get back to the legs here. Let's, for example, take this part here. And now I don't want to remove anything and do the complex workflow I just showed you in the tip before, but I just want to align my manipulator that it is pointing perfectly in this direction of this part here, for example. What I can do is simply go to edit mode, look for a face which has this orientation. So for example, this one over here. If there is no face, you can certainly temporarily create a face which has the orientation, and then press N, go to transform orientation and simply hit the plus button. And if I now go in here, you have this new one which is called face. You can also do it with edges and so on. And now let's quickly go back to object mode. And if I now go to face, you can see this is aligning perfectly to the face normal of this face up here. So let's add a new cube, for example, make this smaller. And now you can see this transform orientation is aligned to this, so I can move this along this axis here. And you can also remove this transform orientation by simply clicking this X button here. Hack number 10, change view to face normal. Okay, let's use this leg part here once again, and let's disable the subsurf modifier, apply the mirror modifier. And now I want to add a knife project. So let's, for example, create a plane here, rotate this a bit, and here, for example, the custom orientation would be nice again. So let's quickly add one. And now, as you can see, I can move this along here. So I just have this few planes, and there's this nice little tool which is called knife project. That means I have one separate mesh, and project the edges onto another one. And this will happen from our view. So if I look at this like this and then execute the operation, it will be projected from our view onto the other mesh. But in this case, I want to have this perfectly aligned. So what we can do is to change our view to the face normal of the selected face over here. So important, select face selection and then hit Shift numpad 7. Now as you can see, our view perfectly aligns to the selected face. To show you this better, I select this one here, Shift 7, and now as you can see, this perfectly aligns. So, and now let's go back to object mode, select this one, then with Shift this one over here, switch to edit mode, and then we can use this knife project. And now perfectly straight from our view, this was cut into the other mesh. This is just one simple example. There are many examples where you can make use of this Shift numpad 7 view. Hack number 11, optimize display with local view. So let's imagine we want to work on this belt here. But as you can see, the creature is covering quite a lot of the area from the belt, and this would make this a bit hard to edit. So what we can do is press slash on the numpad to switch to local view and start editing this, so we can only see the selected objects. Then hit slash again to go back. But the problem is, if I now start to edit this over here and then go back, it might happen that I edit this so far that it is intersecting with the body or the vest here. So it would be cool to have both things, to see one view with the creature and one view without. And this is possible by simply splitting your view. In one of them, hit slash on the numpad, and as you can see, this is only affecting one viewport. And now, if I like, I can go to edit mode and see what happens over there on the creature, but at the same time I can freely navigate around here and see it from every angle. And this makes editing much easier. Hack number 12, convert hair particles to curves. This one is a pretty cool trick I learned from Lukas Walzer. So if I add a particle system to this plane here, switch the type to hair, then we have this nice hair particles. Let's put this down to 0. Then we can switch over to particle edit mode. Press T and click on the add button and set the count down to 1, for example. And then I can add single hair strands, as you can see. So let's add a few. Then let's go to the hair particle settings. Go to children's, enable simple, and then you can say how many you want to have. Let's keep it by 10 right now. You can go back to particle edit mode and go to comp, for example, to move the hair particles around. And if this is too rough in resolution, you can increase the parse steps here like this. Also for object mode display, you can go to display and increase the steps if you like. And then we can go back to the children's and, for example, at this radial, increase the amplitude if you like. So you can use this kink methods. There's also the curl one to make something like this, or the wave. So just try around with different methods. Also you can add a braid, which is looking also pretty funny right now. So let's go with the radial here and increase the frequency a bit. And now let's go over to the modifiers, and here we can convert this. So let's click on this. And now if I go to edit mode, you can see this is a mesh now. And if you hit Alt C, you can convert this curve from mesh into a curve, for example. And then go over to the curve settings, go to shape, set the fill type to full. And then under geometry, you can increase the bevel depth and you can increase the resolution to make this round. Then let's set this to smooth shading, and then you have, as we would say in Germany, the Kabelsalat. And if you like, you can go into edit mode, press L a few times to basically select some random cables here and scale them with Alt S. So make them thinner, then maybe with L select another few ones, make them thicker. And then you have this crazy looking cables. In edit mode, you can select all this up here, for example, enable proportional editing and move them around if you want to edit them. And as you can see, the original hair particles are still there. You can disable them if you like. Look at this. Hack number 13. Convert edges to curves for creating pipes. So just in the tip before I showed you how to convert hair to curves, but you can also convert edges to curves. So for this, I can, for example, add another cube here and then start to edit edges over here. So for example, let's select this one here, press Ctrl B to add a bevel. Then this one here, for example, to bevel this. So basically I kept always one edge in my view, and this is this one, which is going here, then over here, and then over here. So then I select this one edge here, this one, and I press Ctrl I to invert the selection, press X, delete, and then we have this shape left. So basically you can create whatever shape you like or select loops or whatever. Then go to object mode, press Alt C, and then we again convert this mesh or these edges into a curve from mesh. And then same thing as before, we can create a pipe out of this. So let's duplicate this to create another pipe here, Alt S to scale this. And certainly what you can do right now is press Alt C again and convert this to a mesh if you like. And then you have the option to, I don't know, like cut this here or extrude this if you like to add some more interesting shapes here. And then certainly you could add a solidify modifier over here to add thickness. Set this to be smooth shading and maybe add an edge split modifier to have sharp edges over here, and then you can easily create some interesting looking pipes pretty quick. And final hack number 14, convert edges to curves for creating seams. So in this case, I don't mean seams for UV mapping, I mean this seams here to add this nice seam on clothing, to add this high level detail to make this look much better. So if you turn this off, this wouldn't look that interesting anymore. And actually it's pretty easy to create them. It took me, I don't know, like 10 or 15 minutes to create all the seams for all the clothing parts here. So let me quickly show you how I did it. So the bad thing here on this cloth is that the edges which I have here did not perfectly fit to the seam areas where I want to edit this. So what you certainly could do is select an edge if this is perfectly aligning with the seam line basically. You can press Shift D to duplicate this, press P selection to separate this, remove the solidify modifier and then convert this into a curve. But if you have it like in my case that there is no perfect edge in edit mode which you can use, you have to do it manually. So what you can do is to simply add a new plane, switch to edit mode, press Alt M to merge all the selected vertices into one vertex. So I have one vertex left. Then I enable snapping, face, and enable all these buttons over here. And now if I move this over here, it will snap to the geometry here. So I can easily press E for extruding or simply Control left click here to add this edge over here. Maybe go also in this way and then all over the place. Then you can also Shift D one vertex and then go on different areas. So something like this. Now I have 3 different lines. Let's move them to an empty layer. Let's enable the grid floor for a second. Shift C to recenter the 3D cursor. Now let's set the origin of this object to the center here. Set origin to 3D cursor. And then I go to edit mode, press P, and then separate by loose parts. So everything which is not connected will be separated as separate object in object mode. So P by loose parts. Now let's add a cube here, scale it pretty small. And important, the cube should be at the exact same position as the origin of these curves here, which is down here. So let's make it pretty simple, scale it a bit, add some loops, maybe a bit bigger. You can also add a bevel modifier, whatever you like. But certainly this is only a small detail, so you don't need that high resolution. Let's add an array modifier, increase the X distance here a bit, and then we can increase the count. Now all we need to do is to add a curve modifier. So I notice I didn't convert them into a curve, so I select all of them, press Alt-C again, and then curve from mesh text. Click on this, and now these are curves. So this is important, and now let's select this object down here. Then we have the curve modifier on this, and this one has the name 081. So let's just type in 081, click on this. And now you can see, since they are lying on the exact same spot in terms of the origin, now this is perfectly aligning here. And then we can increase the array count. Then I simply duplicate this object, not the curve, the seams here. Then let's select this one, it's called 082. So select one of those two here and change the name to this one here. Decrease the count a bit. Can also shift and then left click and drag on this value to slightly change the distance to adjust the length of the curve. And then let's duplicate this again, and this curve is called 080. Let's change this over here, and then certainly you have to adjust the count. So, and in this way you can easily add seams, for example, to your clothing. And let's take a look at here. This is what my final result looks like.
Yeah guys, these are my 14 tips for you. Hopefully they are useful in your projects. If you want to learn even more tips, check out my other video, 17 tips to speed up modeling in Blender. I guess if you like this video, you will like this other video as well. Also, if you have some other cool hacks for modeling in Blender, or if you know some ways to optimize the workflows I've showed you in this video, let me know in the comments below. Yeah, if you like what I'm doing, hit the like button, share this video, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to get notified for future videos. And again, a big thank you to AD Boris and Gleb Alexandrov for supporting this video. Check out their latest hard surface modeling course, link in the video description below. Guys, thanks a lot for all your support. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Oh, one thing I forgot. If you want to meet me in person or all the other cool Blender guys, I encourage you to join the Blender Conference 2018 in Amsterdam. It will happen on October 25th to 27th. I've been there 5 times already, and it's always the highlight of the year to meet all the other Blender people, talk to them, listen to nice talks and workshops. So tickets are sold out pretty fast, so hurry up if you want to join. It would be awesome to see you guys there. Check the link in the video description for more info. Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.